Clara Whitmore stood at the edge of the ranch porch as the sun dipped behind the far western hills, turning the sky into a soft blaze of gold and rose. She felt the familiar tremor in her chest that came every time she thought about speaking honestly to the man who had given her shelter and work and a quiet kind of hope. Her breath moved slow and heavy like the warm summer wind that rolled off the prairie. Each passing second brought her closer to the moment she could no longer avoid for her. Hart had carried these words for far too many nights. Luke McAllister, the cattle baron of the valley, had built his empire with hard hands and sharper instincts. A man like him was never easy to approach, yet Clara had spent months watching the way. His gaze softened whenever she walked into the room. She had felt the unspoken connection between them growing like a steady flame. Even so, her courage rose only in scattered moments, and tonight she clung to one of those rare moments with a grip. As tight as her own heartbeat, she knew people whispered about the distance between them. For Luke was a man carved from the old mold of the West, tall, proud, and stubborn, while Clara had arrived as a woman trying to rebuild herself from scattered pieces. Many believed she should stay quiet, remain grateful, and never dare to speak desires that lived deep inside her. But the West was a place of rebirth, and Clara wanted to believe that even a bruised soul could grow strong again. The porch boards creaked softly as Luke stepped out of the house behind her. His footsteps carried the weight of a man who had spent his entire life leading others and never once questioning whether he himself wanted to be led. He stopped beside her, silent yet present like the vast land he ruled. His shadow stretched long in the fading light, and Clara felt her courage rise and waver all at once. She turned to him, her pulse racing like horses in a midnight stampede. She could feel her palms grow warm as if her own body begged her to finally speak. At last she lifted her chin and let the words slip free like a breath she had been holding for too long. She said, "Let me take the lead tonight." The moment hung in the air between them, warm, heavy, and unexpected. For Clara, hearing her own voice say those words felt like stepping into a river with no certainty of where the current might take her. She had spoken not with bold fire, but with quiet strength. She wanted him to understand that she trusted him enough to show the side of herself she rarely revealed, the side that had long been overshadowed by fear and silence. Luke did not respond right away. Instead, he looked at her as though he had never seen her fully until this very instant. His gaze held no judgment, only a deep, thoughtful stillness that startled her more than any loud reaction could have. His breath shifted like wind through tall grass, and Clara felt the weight of her own daring press against her ribs. In that silence she remembered every moment that had shaped her journey to this ranch, all the time she had swallowed her voice, all the nights she had convinced herself that she was safer shrinking into the background. She had grown used to letting others make the choices even when her heart whispered for something more. Tonight she refused to shrink any longer. Luke finally stepped closer. His presence was warm, steady, and almost tender in a way that contrasted sharply with the rugged reputation he carried in town. Clara did not know what he might say or do, and the uncertainty wrapped around her like a fragile thread. Yet within that uncertainty came a strange calm, for she had spoken her truth, and she was no longer hiding from it. As the sky deepened into twilight, Clara felt something shift between them, a door opening, a wall falling, a future stirring like a restless breeze ready to reshape everything they thought they knew about each other and themselves. Luke McAllister stood frozen for a long moment after Clara spoke those bold, trembling words. The air between them felt charged, as if the whole prairie were holding its breath. His life had always been a straight line of duty, work, and leadership, and he had rarely been surprised by anything. Yet Clara's request struck him deeper than any business deal or ranch crisis ever could. It was not the words alone that shook him, but the strength behind them, a strength he had seen in glimpses, but never this. Clearly he had known Clara was not like the others who drifted through his world. She carried gentleness, but also a quiet resilience that shone through without her trying. She worked harder than any hired hand and moved through his home with a care that made him feel something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Safe, not in the sense of danger, but in the sense of finally being understood. Luke had lived many years with responsibility as his closest companion, and he had forgotten what it felt like to share his burdens, even the light, soft ones that touched the heart instead of the land. As he studied her face, the last colors of sunset painted her features in warm, golden shades. Clara's eyes were steady despite the fear he could sense beneath them. Her courage was trembling, yet real, like a young foal taking its first step into the open range. She had chosen this moment with intention, and he knew it required a kind of bravery he did not take lightly. Opened his mouth to speak, but no words came at first. Instead, he took a slow breath that rolled through his chest like a settling storm. He remembered the many nights she had walked through his home with thoughtful silence, offering comfort without ever demanding more. He remembered the laughter she tried to hide whenever something amused her, and he remembered the sadness in her eyes on the first day she arrived at his gates, a sadness he had quietly vowed to soften even if he never said it aloud. Clara waited. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, yet she did not step back. Her presence was a plea and a promise all at once. She had asked to lead, but in truth she had asked for something even greater. She sought trust. She sought permission to become more than the woman who kept her heart tucked away. Luke finally found his voice, a deep, steady warmth rising through him like dawn over the mountains. He told her he was not angered, nor confused, nor uncomfortable. He told her he had been waiting for the day she would tell him what she truly wanted, instead of giving him politeness and careful smiles that hid her true feelings. His words were low but sincere, drifting through the evening air like a song carried by the prairie. When Clara blinked, surprised beyond measure. She had expected resistance, embarrassment, maybe even rejection. She had prepared for all of that, yet Luke stood before her not as the unshakable cattle baron, but as a man seeing someone he cared for in a new light. His acceptance washed over her like warm rain that fell after a long drought, and she felt her knees grow weak with relief. Stepped closer, his boots brushing over the worn boards of the porch, and she could feel the shift in the space between them. His presence had always been powerful, but tonight something about it softened, as if her courage had opened a door within him that had long been closed. He reached for her hand with slow, deliberate care, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their fingers met, and the touch carried a promise of balance, tenderness, and shared ground. They stood together as the last light faded and the ranch settled into night. Luke looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, something warm, something proud, something deeply moved. Clara had expected many things when she gathered the courage to speak, but she never imagined his reaction would leave her breathless and full of hope for the future beginning to take shape around them. Clara could feel the warmth of Luke's hand as it held hers, and with every second the courage she had summoned earlier began to settle into a quiet confidence. She realized that speaking her truth had opened a door she had long thought sealed. Her past had been full of men who silenced her voice and made her shrink into shadows, but here on this wide open ranch she felt the first flicker of freedom that had nothing to do with running away and everything to do with standing her ground. The air smelled of dry grass and the faint smoke of a distant campfire, and Clara let her senses take in the moment, the gentle brush of wind through the trees, the low murmur of cattle in the distance, and the steady rhythm of Luke's heartbeat beneath her fingertips. All of it combined into a strange kind of music, a melody she had not realized her soul had been longing to hear. Luke's eyes searched hers as if he was trying to memorize every subtle shift in her expression, every twitch of her lips, every glance that flickered toward the horizon. He wanted to remember, because he understood now that her bravery was not loud or demanding, but quiet, steady, and real. It was a bravery that had grown through hardship and patience, a strength that he had never known before, yet now recognized as the foundation of the woman he had quietly come to care for. Clara's thoughts drifted back to the early days of her arrival at the ranch. She remembered the way she had kept to herself, trying to blend in and never draw attention. She had feared failure and ridicule and the sharp words of men who thought her gentle ways made her weak. She had worked long hours in the sun and the cold, and she had learned to rely on nothing but herself. But all of that had prepared her for this moment, the moment when she finally could assert her voice and ask for what she wanted without hesitation. Luke shifted slightly closer, and she felt the heat of his presence surrounding her like a protective circle. The ranch had always been a place of rules and hierarchy, and yet tonight those rules seemed to dissolve. The man who had always commanded everyone around him now seemed willing to follow her lead in ways that mattered more than cattle deals. To trust her judgment, her instincts, and her heart, she took a slow, deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease just enough to allow a small smile to curve her lips. Luke noticed it, and a faint smile appeared on his own face, the kind that softened the rough edges of his rugged features. Clara felt a spark of hope that maybe she had underestimated the strength of her own desires, because now they were being met with understanding and acceptance instead of dismissal. The prairie night stretched endlessly around them, and the sky was dotted with the first stars of evening. Clara thought of all the nights she had lain awake wondering if she would ever find a place where her voice mattered and where someone would listen without judgment. She realized now that she had found that place not in words alone, but in shared silence in the space between two people willing to see each other fully. Luke's thumb brushed gently over her hand, and Clara felt a shiver of recognition, as if their connection had always been waiting to awaken. She realized that taking the lead did not mean she had to act alone. It meant they could move forward together, guided by mutual respect and shared courage. She felt the weight of past doubts lift, and a new certainty settle in her chest, a certainty that her voice mattered, that her choices mattered, and that she was finally capable of shaping her own destiny. As the night deepened and the prairie cooled, Clara felt a quiet determination rising within her. She knew that speaking those words had been only the beginning, that her strength and Luke's willingness to meet her halfway would shape everything that came next. She squeezed his hand softly and felt him squeeze back, and in that silent affirmation she understood that she was no longer defined by fear, but by the courage to claim what she truly wanted. Night settled over the McAllister ranch like a heavy velvet curtain, and Clara felt a strange calm in the way the darkness wrapped her. On the porch, she could hear the distant low call of a coyote and the whisper of wind moving through the tall prairie grass, but none of it disturbed the moment she shared with Luke. Instead, it seemed to heighten it, making every sound, every shadow feel like part of the rhythm of their connection. Luke's gaze never left hers, and she felt as if he were looking into parts of her she had long kept hidden, even the parts she had tried to bury deep behind polite smiles and quiet work. He seemed to understand that the courage she had shown tonight was not just about asking to take the lead, but about trusting him enough to let him in fully. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear, excitement, and relief, because she knew that once trust was offered, it could never be taken back. It could only grow or falter. Clara thought about all the ways her life had prepared her for this moment. She had grown up learning to be careful, to keep her opinions muted and her desires hidden from men who might see them as weakness. She had survived hardship after hardship, and yet here she was choosing to be vulnerable and bold at the same time. It was a contradiction that made her stomach flutter with anticipation and fear, but she refused to let fear dictate her next move. Luke shifted slightly closer, his shoulder brushing hers, and the warmth of his presence was steady and grounding. Clara realized that strength could take many forms. It could be the firmness of a man used to leading cattle and commanding respect, or the quiet confidence of a woman willing to voice her truth and insist on being heard. Both strengths were necessary, and together they created a balance she had never experienced before. The silence between them stretched comfortable and intimate, and Clara felt the rhythm of their breathing align in a way that made her chest feel lighter. She realized that this was what she had been longing for, without fully understanding it, the opportunity to stand beside someone who valued her not for her labor or obedience, but for the woman she had become. The opportunity to show courage without fear of rejection. Luke finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate, and Clara felt it resonate deep in her chest. He told her that he had always respected her strength and admired her patience, and that tonight he was seeing the full measure of her courage in a way he could not ignore. She felt her pulse quicken at his words, and a warmth spread through her. That had nothing to do with the summer night. She squeezed his hand lightly, letting him know she had heard him, and she had understood the depth of what he was saying. It was more than reassurance. It was recognition of her entire being, her fears, her dreams, and her willingness to step forward despite them. She realized that in speaking her truth, she had also given him the chance to show the tenderness that had been waiting under his rugged exterior. As the stars multiplied in the sky, Clara felt a sense of clarity she had never known before. She knew that taking the lead tonight was not about control or dominance. It was about partnership, trust, and the courage to be seen fully for who she was. She felt the weight of her past begin to lift, replaced by the certainty that she could claim her own place in the world. With Luke beside her, the wind carried the faint scent of sage and the distant sound of cattle lowing, and Clara breathed it in, letting it mingle with the warmth of Luke's hand and the quiet strength of his presence. She realized that this night was only the beginning, that their story was just starting to unfold, and that every moment moving forward would be shaped by the balance of her courage and his willingness to meet her where she stood in the stillness of the prairie night. Clara felt a profound sense of possibility. She had spoken her truth and been met with acceptance and understanding. She had claimed her voice, and Luke had claimed the courage to listen. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, guided by trust, respect, and the quiet power of two hearts willing to stand side by side. Prairie night stretched wide and infinite around Clara and Luke and the Fae. Quiet hum of life on the ranch filled the space between them. Clara felt the steady beat of Luke's hand in hers, and it reminded her that courage could be gentle as well as bold. She realized that taking the lead was not about pushing or commanding, but about showing what she felt and letting him respond in his own way. It was a dance of trust and timing, of hearts moving closer without fear. Luke's eyes held a softness she had rarely seen before, and it made her chest swell with emotion. Remembered the first time she had arrived at the ranch alone, uncertain and wary. She had thought that her voice would never matter in a world ruled by men who measured strength by size and stubbornness. Yet here she was speaking her desires aloud, and being met with listening and respect. She felt a thrill of relief and empowerment that made her knees want to tremble. They stood side by side on the porch, and Clara let the silence grow between them. It was a silence that carried the weight of shared experience and mutual understanding. She could feel the warmth radiating from him as naturally as the lingering heat of the day. She realized that for the first time she did not have to hide behind polite words or careful gestures. She could simply be herself and trust that he would meet her with equal honesty. Luke shifted slightly, drawing her hand a little closer, and she felt a shiver of recognition. He did not speak immediately, but the look in his eyes said everything she needed to know: that he had seen her courage, that he respected her choices, that he was willing to follow her lead, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He had always been a man of action, yet tonight he acted by being present and attentive, and that presence carried more weight than any command he could give Clara. As thoughts drifted to all the quiet moments they had shared over the past weeks, the laughter over small mistakes, the careful listening when fears were confessed, the gentle encouragement when she doubted herself, all of it had been preparation for this moment, for the night when she would step forward fully and he would meet her without judgment. She realized that the trust between them had grown like the grass on the prairie, strong and steady under sun and rain. The stars overhead multiplied until the sky was a blanket of shining light. Clara let her eyes wander over them, feeling the vastness of the world around them and the intimate closeness of the man beside her. She realized that courage was not just about speaking. It was about showing oneself completely and allowing another to respond with equal authenticity. It was about partnership and respect, and the quiet certainty that comes when two hearts understand each other. Luke finally broke the silence, and his voice was low, warm, and unwavering. He told her that he had always admired her strength and the way she carried herself with dignity. Despite the hardships she had faced, he said that tonight he understood the full measure of her courage and that he was proud of her for taking the lead. Clara felt a rush of emotion so strong she could barely breathe. She had expected resistance or hesitation, yet here he was affirming her every word and action. She squeezed his hand in return, letting him feel the gratitude and trust that she held for him. It was a promise that she would continue to step forward, and that she believed he would continue to meet her with the same openness. She felt a deep connection forming, a bond built not on fear or expectation, but on respect, courage, and shared willingness to be fully seen. Prairie night whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and distant campfires, and Clara realized that this moment was more than a single night. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a time when she could claim her voice and Luke could respond with heart and soul. It was a balance of strength and vulnerability, and in that balance she found a sense of freedom she had never known before, and a certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Storm rolled across the prairie with a low rumble that made the horizon tremble, and Clara watched as the dark clouds stretched wide, blotting out the last traces of sunlight. She could feel the wind picking up and the smell of rain heavy on the air, yet inside the ranch house the warmth remained steady and comforting. The storm outside seemed to mirror the intensity of emotion swirling between her and Luke, and she realized that life and love could both arrive suddenly, and without warning Luke stood beside her on the porch, his presence a steady anchor against the chaos of the storm. His hand found hers instinctively, and she felt the reassurance of his strength without any need for words. They had already spoken much tonight, yet now the silence carried a different weight. It was a silence filled with shared understanding of past hardships and the new beginnings they were daring to shape together. First drops of rain splashed against the roof, and Clara felt the cool mist on her skin. The first drops of rain splashed against the roof, and Clara felt the cool mist on her skin. Sensation made her shiver, but it was not unpleasant, for it reminded her that life was unpredictable and beautiful at the same time. She had spent so many years hiding from storms, both literal and metaphorical, yet now she found herself standing firm, letting the elements wash over her while knowing she was not alone. Luke's eyes never left hers, and in the stormy twilight she saw not only the rugged man who ruled the ranch, but also the caring soul who had quietly observed her courage and resilience. His gaze was steady, warm, and protective, and Clara felt her heart respond with a mixture of awe and trust. She understood that leadership and tenderness could coexist, and that a man could be strong without ever diminishing the woman beside him. She thought of all the times she had been silenced by fear or by others' expectations, and realized that speaking her truth tonight had altered the path they were walking. It was not merely about taking the lead in a fleeting moment. It was about showing strength and trusting another to meet her without judgment or insistence. The storm outside only amplified the significance of this revelation, for it was a reminder that life would always be unpredictable, yet shared courage made it manageable. The rain began to fall in earnest, and Clara could hear it striking the tin roof in steady rhythm. She found comfort in the sound, as if it were heartbeat echoing her own. Luke squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back, letting the contact carry everything words could not fully present. He remained beside her, letting her feel that her courage mattered, that her voice mattered, and that together they could withstand whatever storms came next. Clara reflected on the journey that had led her to this porch on this stormy night. She had arrived at the ranch tentative and cautious, unsure if she could ever truly express herself or be heard, yet each challenge and each quiet victory had prepared her for this moment when she could finally step forward and claim her place beside a man who valued her completely. She realized that vulnerability and bravery were intertwined and that tonight she had learned the true meaning of both. Lightning flashed across the horizon and the prairie lit for an instant like a great canvas, revealing every contour of the land. Clara felt a thrill of excitement at the brilliance and realized that love could strike as suddenly and beautifully as any storm. The rain soaked through her hair and clothes, yet she felt no discomfort because the heat of connection with Luke kept her centered, grounded, and alive as the storm raged outside and the night deepened. Clara understood that this shared experience had strengthened the bond between them. The tempest could not break them, nor could the uncertainties of the prairie, for they had found balance, trust, and courage within each other. She held his hand tightly, knowing that together they could face any challenge and that the night of storms would be remembered not for fear but for the unwavering partnership that had begun to take shape. Clara felt the warmth of Luke's hand as he held hers, and in that simple touch she found a quiet courage she had never known before. She realized that taking the lead tonight was not about forcing her will upon him, but about guiding him gently with patience, trust, and honesty. It was a different kind of strength, one that did not demand compliance, but invited cooperation and mutual respect. She looked up at him and saw the flicker of understanding in his eyes, the recognition that she was not asking to dominate or control, but to show him the fullness of her heart. She reached for his other hand, intertwining her fingers with his, and felt a shiver of reassurance run through her. She was leading with tenderness, with clarity, with the quiet determination of someone who knew her worth and refused to hide it. Luke responded in kind, not with hesitation or fear, but with openness and willingness. His thumb brushed over her knuckles lightly, and she felt the rhythm of his heartbeat align with hers. It was as if the entire ranch around them had paused to witness this silent exchange of trust and commitment. She realized that guiding him did not make her less, nor did it make him weak. Instead, it created a new balance, a partnership that neither of them had experienced before. Clara took a small step closer, closing the space between them, and felt the comforting weight of his presence. She spoke softly, not with words that demanded agreement, but with words that invited connection. She asked him to trust her, to follow her instincts, and to allow her to show him how she could take the lead in a way that strengthened them both. Luke nodded slightly, letting her know that he understood completely and that he was willing to step forward with her in this new rhythm. The prairie night stretched wide around them, and the stars twinkled faintly through the remaining clouds of the storm. She could hear the distant low moan of cattle and the whisper of wind in the grass, and it all seemed to echo the new cadence she and Luke were creating together. Clara felt a thrill of empowerment that came not from dominance, but from the recognition that she could move boldly and gently at the same time. Luke's voice broke the silence, low, warm, and sincere, and she felt it resonate through her chest. He told her that he had always admired her strength and patience, and that seeing her lead now made him proud in a way he could not have predicted. She squeezed his hand lightly, letting him feel her gratitude and her trust, and the bond between them deepened with every passing heartbeat. Clara thought of all the lessons she had learned in life about courage and humility. She realized that leadership was not always loud or commanding. It could be quiet, deliberate, and nurturing, guiding others not by force but by understanding and empathy. She felt a deep satisfaction knowing that she was embodying this truth in her own life and that Luke was recognizing it and matching it step by step. The storm had passed, but the night was alive with the energy it had left behind. The ranch seemed to hold its breath as if acknowledging the subtle but powerful shift between them. Clara felt a surge of hope and determination. She knew that taking the lead tonight was only the beginning, that together they would navigate every challenge, every triumph, and every quiet moment with the same balance of courage and trust. As she looked into Luke's eyes, she understood that leading did not mean acting alone. It meant moving forward with clarity, confidence, and care, while allowing him to meet her with equal honesty and respect. She felt a sense of completion, a sense that she had claimed her voice and her place without diminishing his strength. and that the partnership they were forging would guide them through whatever the future might hold. Luke's expression softened as he stood beside Clara on the porch, and in that quiet moment she could see the depth of feeling he had carried all along. He had spent a lifetime commanding men, negotiating land, and running the ranch with careful precision. And yet now he seemed to recognize that true strength lay not only in authority but in the ability to honor the courage of another. His eyes held a warmth that made Clara's chest tighten, and she realized that her decision to take the lead tonight had opened something inside him that had long been waiting for release. He spoke low and deliberate, his words carrying a sincerity that made her breath catch. He told her that he had always admired her determination and resilience, and that seeing her assert herself so fully filled him with a pride he had never experienced before. She felt her pulse quicken at his acknowledgement, and understood that this was more than praise. It was a promise, it was an unspoken vow that he would never dismiss her voice, nor diminish her choices, that he would meet her courage with equal courage, and that together they would navigate life as partners. Clara's eyes glistened as she took in his words, and she felt a rush of emotion that combined relief, joy, and a profound sense of belonging. She had feared that her boldness might push him away or cause discomfort, yet instead he embraced it with openness and love. It was a revelation that changed everything she had believed about power, trust, and the balance between two strong hearts. The night air carried a gentle chill and the scent of wet earth from the passing storm, and Clara shivered slightly, yet the warmth of Luke's presence beside her kept her grounded. She understood that his promise was not empty. It was backed by the steady reliability that had defined his life and the quiet tenderness that he had reserved for those rare moments of true connection. She felt that tenderness wrap around her like a protective cloak, making her braver than she had ever been. Luke reached for her hand again, letting his fingers intertwine with hers, and Clara felt a surge of certainty pass through her. She realized that taking the lead tonight was not about controlling the path, but about illuminating it, showing him where she could guide them, and trusting that he would meet her halfway. His affirmation was more powerful than any agreement of obedience or dominance. It was a recognition of equality and respect. She looked up at him, her voice steady and soft as she spoke of her hopes and intentions, not in demands but in clarity and honesty. She told him that she wanted to continue stepping forward with courage, and that she hoped he would continue meeting her with the same openness and consideration. His response was a smile that reached his eyes and a nod that conveyed more than words ever could. It was an understanding that she had been longing for all her life. The stars above seemed to twinkle with gentle approval, as if witnessing the bond forming between them. Clara felt a surge of hope that this night marked a turning point, not only in their relationship, but in the way they would face the world together. She knew that Luke's promise was more than emotion. It was a commitment to honor her voice, to respect her choices, and to grow alongside her with patience and love. As the night deepened, the ranch around them quieted except for the soft murmur of the wind and the distant lowing of cattle. Clara felt a profound sense of completion. She had claimed her courage, and Luke had claimed the awareness that strength was shared, not imposed. She held his hand tightly, knowing that this unspoken promise would guide them through every challenge and triumph ahead, and that together they had begun a partnership that could weather any storm or trial the prairie might send their way. The morning sun rose slowly over the prairie, casting golden light across the McAllister ranch, and Clara felt the warmth of its rays on her face. She watched Luke moving through the corral, checking the cattle, and she realized how much had changed between them in the short hours since last night. The quiet balance they had begun to forge was already shaping the way they moved together, like two forces that had learned to bend and flow with one another. Clara walked beside him, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread, and she felt a sense of confidence that had been absent in her life for many years. She realized that taking the lead was not about commanding attention or control. It was about stepping forward with clarity and trust, and allowing the other person To meet her with respect and understanding, she could see Luke's eyes flick to her occasionally, and in she read pride, admiration, and a gentle acknowledgement that she had changed the rhythm of their lives. The ranch hands noticed the subtle shift in their dynamic as well. They had always seen Luke as the unshakable authority and Clara as the quiet helper, yet now it was different. She moved beside him as an equal, her presence carrying a quiet power that had nothing to do with the work she performed and everything to do with the courage she had found within herself. Luke's respect for her was evident in every glance, every gesture, and the ranch hands recognized it too and adjusted their own behavior accordingly. Clara felt a thrill of empowerment knowing that her voice and presence mattered not only to Luke but to the larger world of the ranch. She had learned that leadership could be gentle, patient, and strong without being overbearing, and that her courage had opened doors not just for herself but for the way others perceived her. She felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had stepped forward and claimed her space with dignity. Luke stopped for a moment and looked at her, his expression soft yet firm, and Clara felt her heart skip. She realized that this morning was different from any other they had shared. She was no longer a silent observer of his world, but a participant shaping it with insight and courage. He nodded slightly as if to acknowledge her presence and her contributions, and she understood that their partnership had begun to extend beyond emotions into action. They moved together through the ranch, accomplishing tasks with a rhythm that felt natural and fluid. Clara found that she could speak freely about decisions and ideas, and that Luke listened thoughtfully without dismissing her. She realized that the trust and respect that had begun last night was now translating into the way they faced everyday life together, and it gave her a deep sense of fulfillment and hope. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the prairie seemed alive with possibility. Clara felt her spirit lift as she worked alongside Luke. Her confidence was not loud or brash, but steady and undeniable. She understood now that taking the lead meant claiming her voice and choices while allowing Luke's strength and wisdom to complement her own. It was a balance that felt rare and precious. As they finished the morning tasks and moved toward the ranch house, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude and certainty. She had found a place where her courage was valued and where Luke's respect allowed her to grow further. She squeezed his hand briefly, letting him know that she appreciated the trust and partnership between them, and he responded with a look full of warmth, reassurance, and pride. Clara realized that this day marked a turning point not just for her own sense of self, but for the way their lives would unfold. She had stepped forward, been met with acceptance, and together they had begun to walk a path of equality, trust, and shared courage. The ranch no longer felt like a place where she merely existed, but a place where she belonged and her presence mattered, and the partnership with Luke would guide them through every sunrise and challenge yet to come. Clara stood on the porch as the late afternoon sun bathed the ranch in golden light, and she felt a sense of completion she had never known before. The journey that had begun with a single bold request to take the lead tonight had grown into something far greater than either of them had anticipated. It had transformed not only her own confidence, but the way Luke saw her and the way their lives intertwined across the sprawling prairie. She watched Luke moving among the cattle with careful precision and a quiet authority that had always commanded respect, yet now it was paired with something new, a tenderness for her courage and an awareness that true strength was measured not only by control but by the ability to recognize and honor the strength of another. Clara felt a swell of pride knowing that she had played a part in bringing this balance into their lives. The ranch hands noticed the change too. They had always respected Luke as their leader, yet now they also respected Clara as a partner whose voice and decisions carried weight. The way she moved beside him, guiding gently, suggesting changes, and asserting herself when needed, created a harmony on the ranch that had been absent before. Her presence was no longer quiet or hidden, but integrated naturally into the rhythm of daily life. Clara reflected on all that had led her to this moment, the nights of doubt, the careful hiding of her true desires, and the years spent measuring every word and gesture had shaped her courage. She realized that taking the lead had not meant overpowering anyone but stepping fully into her own power and trusting Luke to meet her with equal respect and understanding. It was a lesson she would carry with her always. Luke paused and looked toward her, his eyes catching the sunlight in a way that made her heart tighten. She saw pride, admiration, and a deep, unspoken love in his gaze. A man who had spent decades commanding respect had chosen to honor her voice and her courage fully, and Clara knew in that moment that she had never needed permission to lead, only the right person to walk beside her. She returned his look with quiet confidence, knowing that their partnership was now solid, unshakable, and built on mutual trust. They moved together through the ranch, addressing chores and decisions in a way that felt effortless yet powerful. The balance between them was delicate yet firm. Her instincts guided, his experience complemented, and neither felt diminished by the other. They spoke freely, shared thoughts, and supported one another in a rhythm that was both new and timeless. Clara marveled at the ease of it and the quiet joy it brought her. Sky deepened into shades of amber and rose, and the prairie seemed to glow with the same warmth she felt in her chest. She thought of how far she had come from the timid woman who had first arrived at the ranch, unsure of her place. She had found her voice, claimed her strength, and been met with understanding and love. She realized that true partnership did not erase her individuality but enhanced it, allowing her courage to flourish alongside Luke's steadfast presence. As the day drew to a close, Clara felt a profound sense of possibility. She understood that their story would continue to unfold with challenges, triumphs, and quiet moments of connection. Yet she also knew that they had created a foundation strong enough to withstand whatever came next. Their bond was no longer defined by fear, hesitation, or unspoken longing, but by equality, trust, and the courage to walk side by side through life. Clara took a deep breath. Feeling the wind sweep across the prairie and the warmth of Luke's hand in hers, she realized that she had changed the life of the most stubborn man in the West, not through force or confrontation, but through quiet courage and the willingness to claim her place. The woman who had once hidden had become the partner who led, guided, and inspired, and together they had forged a love that was as enduring and boundless as the land around them. Sun set slowly beyond the hills, casting long shadows over the ranch, and Clara smiled. She knew that this was only the beginning, and yet it was perfect in its completion. They had faced the unknown, embraced courage, and discovered a partnership that could shape the course of their lives forever. And she understood that she would never again doubt the power of speaking her truth and walking forward with heart and strength fully intact.